Bottom third in the Big Ten? Yeah, I don't think so. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Harings. Thank you for being here, being part of this community, making it a part of your everyday routine and being an everydayer. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Today's episode, community show. Your comments, your thoughts, a way to continue connecting to the community, bringing your thoughts into the show. Locked On Big Ten co-members, Locked On Big Ten hosts said the Badgers are going to be bottom third in the Big Ten, bottom three in the Big Ten. How deep is this basketball team? Plus a lot more. This is all your comments, your thoughts, your questions. Let's get into it. The first one is from Evil Badger. These are off the YouTube shows. Locked On Big has picked Wisconsin to finish in the bottom third of the Big Ten. Yeah, I've talked about this a lot, and I wasn't on that show to defend the Badgers, but I've talked about this a lot. And one of the things I keep coming back to, and I think it's salient, I think it's important to understand, it's important to think about. We are very much in society to some degree, what happened lately. We are creatures of what immediately happened. We live in a fast click world. What just happened last? What is the last impression we have of the team? And it's not great for Wisconsin. But even then, it's not that terrible. The last gasp for Wisconsin last year was a 5-17. This team is not suddenly new Indiana or new Rutgers, right? Where they're a bottom basement cellar dweller. And by the way, Indiana is not suddenly old Wisconsin, where you're just going to pencil them into the top half of the Big Ten every year. I think there's a little too much whiplash based on last year. This is still a team that has not finished in the bottom third in the Big Ten since when? Outside of last year, when's the last time Wisconsin even missed a bowl game in 20-something years? I just push back on this. I think it's a little bit of reactionism, a little bit of, well, man, one bad year, this is the start of something, maybe. Or maybe it's just a blip in the data. It's a fly in the soup, and you take it out, and it's still Wisconsin. I think a lot of things got fixed. I think Luke Fickell is a guy who understands what went wrong. I do think the quarterback is better. And that alone is a huge deal for this program. I think the depth on the lines are better. Those were your two biggest issues last year, along with probably Phil Longo. And he's gone too. Is it all perfect? No. Is it going to be a great season? I don't think so. Is the jury still out somewhat on Luke Fickell? I think absolutely it has to be. But let's not go overboard. Let's not drive off the cliff with it. Wisconsin to finish in the bottom third. What is Wisconsin suddenly in the midst of Purdue, Rutgers, Northwestern? I don't know. We are with Luke Fickell coming in. He's put together a couple really good recruiting classes. I think those are going to start to bear fruit. I like the coaches on this staff. Again, there's a lot to prove, and you got to show it on the field. But I think people have just gone overboard with this idea that Wisconsin is suddenly cooked because of essentially one bad year. This is a program that survived coaching transition before, that has survived conference realignment before. It's a program that has been as rock solid as any. Think of the stock market, right? If you had a company that was as rock solid as it got, just steady returns year after year, decade after decade, that it was just, you could set your clock to them at least delivering a solid return. And then they give you one bad year and suddenly you're going to be like, nope, that's a crypto bust. That's a .com bust. I'm selling all Wisconsin stock. I'd say, let's hold on to it for more than a year. So push back for me a little bit on that. Again, I lean optimist. You guys know that, but this team is not suddenly one of the worst programs in the Big Ten. I don't think that's going to happen. This one, I love this comment. Lee Herlash says, Krabbenhoff had very positive enthusiasm on Garlick and Greppy. He went on, I think it was the swing. This team is very deep. I paused on that and I thought about that for a long time. And Lee, thanks for jumping in the show. And thank you for everybody for submitting comments. I don't always respond to everything, but I read everything and I try to work them to this show. So know that it's appreciated and seen. Always, always, always. And I paused on this comment for a long time, Lee, and I said, this team is very deep, right? And I think I went for a walk thinking about that, and I mowed the lawn thinking about that. And I don't know if it is. First of all, let's start with the Garlock and Greppy stuff where Krabbenhoff was positive. To me, it feels like those are still long-term plays. You can be positive about something, but maybe realize it won't really take root for a couple years. Like if I plant a tomato plant, I can be super positive about what's going to happen there because I'm a pretty good gardener. Like I really am. Like I take care of my stuff. Like I fertilize, I water, I put it in a good sunspot, I support it. Like I trust me, no hyperbole. I get into it with the garden, but it's still not going to bear fruit for a while. And I think that's kind of like, yeah, I really like if speaking as thinking, channeling my inner Krabbenhoff, right? I'm certainly not speaking for him, but I could see him saying, I love the physical tools of Garlock. 7-footer, can move, big wingspan, huge hands. I mean, he can make the basketball look like a volleyball, but it's still probably a couple years away. And then I look at the rest of the team, and I'm just not sure it's so deep. I look at last year's team, and it's early. We don't fully know what these guys are going to be because if you went back to the beginning of last year, we didn't think Kamari McGee or Carter Gilmore would give you what they gave you. But I look at this year's team, and I don't know if Braden Carrington is an ideal six man. And I don't know if a guy like Gray is really well suited after not starting at Temple to step into a big role in the Big Ten. Janicki has to take a big step up to be that sixth, seventh man off the bench. And that's what I think is a lot of questions. I'm not sure on the freshman. I'm not sure on a guy like Robeson. I'm not sure on a guy like Greppy. I actually kind of think, and you guys let me know in the comments. We'll do a whole nother show on it. I actually think this year's team could end up being, a little top heavy. I love the starting five. I think they're gonna cook. I've talked about it. I think there's a lot of question marks on the bench, and I'm just being real. Again, I'm here to be proven wrong. I would love to see a couple more players break out or have incredible years. I'm just not sure. So I'm not sure if it's deep. And tying into this, another comment, and I didn't get the name of this one, but he said, I just watched Hayden Jones ring up 23 points against Switzerland. Hayden Jones and Jackson Ball on that New Zealand team have been playing a lot, been watching that. This win earned New Zealand their first Final Four in the FIBA U under 19. I'm curious if Jones can contribute some minutes as a freshman. So Hayden Jones coming in, scored pretty well in this entire FIBA U19 tournament, shot the ball pretty well, also showed some playmaking, the ability to get in the paint and distribute. I liked what I saw. And I like both these players. I like Jackson Ball. I like Hayden Jones. They're both pretty similarly sized. They both have skill. They can both shoot. They both showed the ability to get their shot off. I think you also saw them against the American team struggle with some pressure, struggle with some of those athletes. And that's where I think Hayden Jones might need a year. I think he may need a year to adjust to the athleticism he's going to see in the Big Ten, to the physical nature of play he's going to see in the Big Ten. I don't expect him to play right away. That's my take on it. And that shouldn't be seen as a knock. It shouldn't be seen as a negative. Most players aren't going to play right away. It's unfair to expect that. And again, you look at that entire New Zealand team when they ran up against the American team in that tournament, and they ran into a buzzsaw. And it's not just Hayden Jones. It's not Ball. It's not just on them. But it felt like that entire team struggled with the length, the speed, the full court pressure that the Americans were able to put on them. And I think you're going to see a little bit of that with Hayden Jones coming to the Big Ten, with Jackson Ball in a year when he comes to the Big Ten, that they might need a year offensively, but also just defensively, a year to get a little quicker, get a little more used to that type of speed and physical play in the Big Ten. So I would love it if he comes in and he can play right away, can step in. That would be a huge boon to the bench because he's a guy who could play some 2, some 3. He could shoot the ball. He can pass it. I'm just not sure if athletically it's going to be ready year one. And I would be a little surprised if he carved out a consistent role, but it's a good question. Okay, we're going to take a second there for our friends of the show. We're going to come back and talk about, again, some of the pieces off the bench, what role the Badgers football team could play in the national landscape this year, a bunch of your comments, your thoughts, your questions. This show is all about the community. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show over at Game Time. Listen, we talked about a lot. Game Time's incredible. Game Time is the number one spot for all of your ticket needs, whether you're trying to get to Camp Randall, whether you're trying to get to the Kohl Center. Let's just get tickets easier. Let's find the seats so we can bring people together and we can experience more things in life. Let's do those things easier. And Game Time's the way to do it, y'all. This is a service I've used personally. I vouch for it. I was on the way to watch the Braves when I needed tickets. My other tickets fell through because I had a hookup with a friend. That friend fell through. I was like, no worries. I got this. On Game Time, bought the tickets, great seats, incredible price, and they were emailed to me, delivered before our Uber dropped us off. Simple. Saved money. We got great seats. I ate nachos out of a baseball helmet, and I still remember the feeling. It was all because of Game Time. Ditch the stress, buy the tickets with Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. You can create the account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, let's get back into this. Let's talk about the role that Wisconsin football could play this year. Good comment from Craig Fissel here. Some years you are the team to beat, and other years you're playing spoiler. This year the Badgers are the spoilers. Team needs to be nasty and embrace it. I was thinking just nationally, the role Wisconsin could have this year. You play in Ohio State. You play at Bama. You play in Michigan. You play in Iowa. You play in Illinois. You play in Indiana. You play in Oregon. We all know the names, right? We all know everybody on the schedule. And you could wreck some seasons this year if you're the Badgers. And sometimes it's just fun to be that. It's fun to be that team that when a team at the end of the year looks back and says, man, we would have gotten the playoffs, but the Badgers knocked us off. And the Badgers are going to have a ton of opportunities this year. And we talk so much. Where this comment went in my head was what I'm about to drop on y'all. We talk so much. It's almost like a woe is us mentality. And I've done it. Like, man, this schedule's so hard. It's so difficult. Oh, are the Badgers going to beat any of these teams? Well, flip it. Man, the Badgers got a ton of opportunities to make statements. The Badgers have a ton of opportunities to show some proof of concept here in year 3 of Luke Fickell, in year 3 of those recruiting classes, with a new offensive coordinator, right? You finally have Dylan Jones ready to step into this role. You have Billy Edwards Jr., who we like more as a quarterback. You have a ton of opportunity this year. And that is pretty exciting when you think about it. There's going to be a lot of weeks going into that weekend where Wisconsin's going to have a primetime matchup if they play pretty well, where Wisconsin's going to have a lot of eyeballs on them because the opponent they're playing is going to draw those eyeballs. Wisconsin's going to have chances. They're going to have the chance for huge recruiting weekends when they host Ohio State, right? They're going to have a chance for, front page type upsets if they trip off one of these schools. And sometimes that's all you want. Man, a shot at some big-time games and big-time opportunities. And how many years in the Big Ten West? And not to say I didn't miss sleepwalking to 9 wins after last year. Not to say I didn't miss never losing to Minnesota. But there were years, and we all know it, where the Big Ten West, we slept walk to 8-4, 9-3. And there was one really good game on the schedule that year. The Badgers have opportunities this year to give us a lot of good games, to give us a lot of entertainment. And to play spoiler. And to Craig's point here, sometimes you just got to embrace that. Embrace the underdog, embrace being the spoiler, and let's wreck a couple seasons. Let's wreck a couple years for teams and be that speed bump that tripped up some team that thought they were going to kind of cakewalk to their own version of whatever we used to do. And I kind of like that mentality. I'm kind of here for that. Nick F., there were literally thousands shifting back to basketball now. And again, this is not really in order. This is just pulled from the comments section on the YouTube page. Nick F says there were literally thousands of players in D1 last year that averaged 10 points per game or even 13 to 14. I find it weird that Carrington and Gray were like the 6 men or lower at their levels. And Nick kind of just talks about this comment's point. Is that the best we could have done? Is pulling, 5th or 6th men off teams. Is that the best we could have done? And here's what I would tell people. A lot of resources went into, people can like this or not like this. A lot of resources went into keeping Nolan Winter, keeping John Blackwell, landing Nick Boyd, landing Austin Rapp, landing Andrew Rohde. A lot of resources and time went into those things. And it's hard to then go out and land an elite 6-man. And maybe Carrington will be that guy. Carrington's got some physical tools. He can shoot the ball. He's kind of a modern fit. I like the frame. Maybe Gray will be that guy, or maybe Bialuskis will step up. Again, that's another player they brought in. You're talking about bringing in 6 transfer players? You just can't hit a home run at every one of those as much as I would love it. I'm not making excuses. I also think they could have used another scorer off the bench. I look at this reserve group and who's the scoring punch off the bench? Janicki didn't do it last year, and he would have to take a big step to be that. Carrington's not that, I don't think. I don't think Gray is. I don't think Bialuskis is. Again, it goes back to the point. I think the starting lineup's really good. Who's going to give you scoring punch off the bench? I'm not sure. And maybe you don't need it. Maybe you don't need it with the guys and the horses that you have potentially in the starting lineup, or you're going to always have 2 or 3 of those guys out there. You're going to stagger minutes with Bialuskis or Gray or Janicki. You're going to stagger those guys in. So you're always going to have a couple scores on the court. But I get the concern that maybe the bench isn't deep enough and maybe they could have done a little bit better there, which I think is what Nick F is talking about. Appreciate the comment, my friend. Prine says Janicki can play at 3 spots in the rotation, so he might get more opportunities than others. We'll see minutes for up to 11 guys in the early games. That's a super deep. All right, let's break this into 2 parts. Janicki can play at 3 spots in the rotation. So the 1, 2, and 3, I think he could give you spot minutes at the 1 with his decision making. I would caution that teams might light him up with pressure. But he has really, really strong decision-making IQ, instincts. He has a great assisted turnover ratio. He can be a pretty good facilitator out there. Maybe. I could see him playing the 2 and 3 a little more naturally. Minutes up to 11. So our minutes for up to 11 guys. Let's run through it. So you have the 5 starters. If you were to get to 11, what would it look like? So the 5 starters, and obviously Prine is talking early in the season, which I'm acknowledging. He's not saying all season long it's going to be 11. But I love this thought exercise. So let's run through it in our heads. If you were going to get to 11 guys in some form of the rotation early in the year, you'd have the 5 starters, and then you'd be Janicki, Carrington, Bialuskis, Gray. We're at 9. I've said I think Kins is going to get some spot minutes. That's 10. I mean, early in the season, Brian might not be that far off, which is insane. Who would be the 11th guy? Garlock, Greppy, or Robeson, probably one of those 3. Maybe Garlock comes in just because he's a physically imposing guy. Maybe Greppy in year 2. Maybe Robeson for some shooting. Okay, Prime, I see you. I don't know if it's going to be 11, but 9 or 10, I think I could see. And that's pretty deep early in the year. Prime fan also says Gray's a very physical player inside. The Badgers don't just need that in games. They need that in practice. He is a valuable piece. Yeah, it's a good take. Like, the one thing that we sleep on a lot, and I probably do as well, and Prime brings it up here, is the more talent and the more bodies and the more size and really just the more skill sets, right? The more differing skill sets you can bring into your roster, the better your practices are. The better you can emulate other teams, the better you can prepare your roster, the better you can insulate your guys. And Gray is going to be a nice piece that you can put, obviously in games. He's going to play. But in practice, he's going to give you another body that guys like Garlock and Greppy can go against, and a veteran body that's going to be able to, as long as he's coming in with the right mindset, and I'm assuming he is, otherwise he wouldn't be coming in here. He's going to be able to impart some real wisdom onto those younger bigs like Greppy, Bialuskis, Austin Rapp as well, even though they're different types of players. That's still a young player coming in that's going to have to play in the post in the Big Ten to some degree, especially defensively. Gray's going to be able to help there. I think it's a really good point by Prine. All right, we're going to take a break there, come back. I got a bunch more comments, including, am I too nice to people on crossover shows? All of that and more coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. And as always, a quick second to say thank you for hanging out with us. All right, let's get into this. This was a comment. I didn't get the name on this one, but it said kind of poor form. I think this is from my crossover show with the Locked On Ducks, Spencer. And I made a comment that, Locke just wasn't good last year. And he said, this comment says, kind of poor form to still be ragging on Locke. He was a team player, and I kind of hope he tears it up this year based on all that talk. He wasn't that bad. I think there was plenty of blame to go around. Maybe completely fair. Let me acknowledge the first part of this. It's not my intent to keep ragging on Locke or to beat a dead horse or anything like that. And if it feels like I'm doing that, I'll lay off. That is absolutely not the intent. And if nothing else, Braden Locke was an incredibly stand-up guy. The second part of this, he wasn't that bad. I got to push back. I think he was terrible. Gosh, I just said I wasn't going to keep ragging on him. That's not ragging on him, though. That's just the truth of it. And when I talk about this year's team juxtaposed to last year's team, one of the biggest deltas is at quarterback. You have taken a Herculean potential jump because we were so bad. And if you just get to mediocre, I think you're much better. I mean, that is an Olympic high jump difference between terrible to decent. And I think you're going to get there with Billy Edwards And that just is what it is. That's just the truth. That's not me ragging on anybody. That's just the truth of the matter, in my opinion. And the last part of this comment, I think there's plenty of blame to go around. 100% agree. That's not all on luck. Like, I mean, we talked about it ad nauseum, but you had Will Pauling that came down with a case of the dropsies. You had, I think, some issues on the interior line that I didn't anticipate. You had a boundary receiver position that still wasn't consistent enough. You had Longo doing Longo things. You had inconsistencies and depth issues at tight end. This is absolutely not all on Braden Locke, but it still also is on Braden Locke because he was the 16th best quarterback in the Big Ten in passer efficiency. So I think a lot to unpack there. I agree with you on some of this, disagree with you on some of it as well, but appreciate the comment either way. Running with Jason says, Ryan, you really need to start gushing over our Badger players like this Oregon guy was gushing over his players. I get this comment a lot that on crossover shows I'm too nice or like too respectful. I got this comment after the Locked On Penn State show we've done. I've got it after the Locked On Oregon show a couple years ago on the Locked On Ohio State crossover. And here's what I'd say, man. When I'm doing a crossover with like Ohio State, Oregon, or Penn State, they've been beating us and they have better talent. So, like, I hear it. And if the shoe is on the other foot, right, and I was doing a Locked On crossover and we were playing Kennesaw State, I'd probably be a lot more up on our guys too. We got to beat those teams before I can gush over our players that much, right? We have to. We gotta win some marquee games before I can start like gushing over players. Otherwise, what am I doing? You know, like if I was Locked On Oregon, and I love Spence, I get it if maybe he came off a little confident, but he should be confident. You know, they ran the table in the Big Ten last year up until the end, and they have a Phil Knight piggy bank. They have a $40 million roster or whatever it is. But I hear this comment, and this is not the first time I've seen it. Pete P says, Oregon fans, be careful. Only being happy with a national championship can get you to where UW is. UW is one of the most consistent and winningest programs for over 20 years, but wanted more. Yeah, man. Are we where we are at right now because we became dissatisfied with solid and we chased great? Or are we at this point where we are at right now where what we were doing was eroding and we felt like we had to make a change before the bottom fell out? I think it's the latter. I think we were seeing the wheels kind of fall off of Paul Chryst a little bit, and they made a proactive move. And by the way, a proactive move that like everybody lauded when you landed Luke Fickell. I still think it was probably the right decision, and I don't think it was resultant in us wanting more. I think it was to some degree the result of us trying to be, and I say us as in UW, Chris McIntosh being a little proactive and seeing the problem coming and trying to get ahead of it. Now, I will say this. I don't know if it was handled in the best way. I don't know if a more experienced athletic director in that moment handles it differently or better. It's certainly possible. But I think the wheels were starting to fall off, and that's why the moves were made. M. Anderson says, a good friend of the show, by the way, says Wisconsin will be way better this year. I get the reasons people are down on them, but you'll see offensive coordinator, defensive line pieces completely changed the outlook. I think they addressed some of their biggest issues. I really do. Now you got to prove it. 2 years ago, we thought, man, look at all these receiving pieces that are coming in. A year ago, we thought, look at these outside linebackers. Pius is going to get 8 sacks this year. These defensive line pieces now have to go on the field and prove it. The coaching staff has to prove they can put them in the right spots and utilize them. Billy Edwards has to have a solid year, and Grimes has to be good. But, man, I think the momentum is trending for all of those to be pretty solid moves and pretty solid additions and pretty solid upgrades. So I agree with Anderson. I think we're going to be better this year. And it may not be completely reflected in the schedule because of the teams we have to play. But I do think people are shoveling dirt on the Wisconsin grave a little too damn early, a little too damn quickly, a little too damn gleefully, right? A program doesn't bottom out in a year. And I don't think we bottomed out. I think we're better. And I'm looking forward to seeing it this year if it happens. This is from Brian Bursch. So I had a show. I want to lay the context of this before I put this comment up there. I had a show called Elite Recruiting Duos, Elite Recruiting Staff. And I was talking about some of the wins this Badgers recruiting staff has been picking up, even coming off a 5-win season, right? With Petit and Latimer. And then going back last year with, You're looking at last year with Blazek getting Powell and Watts, and you landed a Davenport, and you've landed a Haywood and Dylan Jones and Dupree. I was just kind of taking it off. I was like, man, they've landed a lot of pretty strong talent or like big recruiting battles. And I pointed out, I think this coaching staff could be on the verge of being a really good recruiting staff, with Guyton, with Reed just landing Petit, Guyton landing Carter Smith last year and Hopkins this year. Blazek's a good recruiter. Last year, Whitlow landed Jalen Williams, which is a massive get for Wisconsin. Brian says, what a bunch of bootlicking. The Badgers football recruiting has been subpar under Fickle. Bring back Kristen Leonard. They worked for a lot less money. Listen, I'm here for all takes. Straight up. No opinion is more valuable than another. And I'm here for Brian to call to say I'm too filled with copium, optimism, whatever it is. I'm not being a realist. I would argue that the Badger football recruiting has actually been pretty strong under Fickle, the wins they've gotten. But yeah, maybe I'm too optimistic on it, and maybe we'll see. I mean, it's got to pan out, but I really like the recruiting dynamic that this young staff has put together. A Hill says, anyone see Gilmore sign a professional contract? Yes, I did. I wanted to put this in here because I am so darn excited for him because of what he did. He is so easy to root for. He is a player that just put in work, never went anywhere, never hit the portal, loved the program, beloved by the people in the program, beloved by the players, and he just busted his ass. He worked hard, he developed, he bled for the program, and he turned into just an ultimate glue guy winner this last year. And for him to get a professional contract, heck yeah. Heck yeah. I think that's incredible. What a great story. Rooting for him. Incredible job by Carter Gilmore. And yes, we definitely did see that. We're going to wrap it there. Didn't get to all my comments, but really do appreciate everybody for leaving those comments on YouTube. I always read them, always see them. I do more shows like this where I get those comments integrated into the show because ultimately what this is all about is a community, and it's a community built for fans, by fans, and it's for all of us. So on Wisconsin, appreciate you. We had a ton of content coming up this week. Some really good guests, more on Petit. I think Osen's going to come on. A bunch of great stuff on Wisconsin. Appreciate y'all so much, and we will definitely talk tomorrow.